So this week we are reading chapter 8 of our textbook Microeconomics in Context, and this chapter is about the consumption and the consumer society. And if you remember from chapter 1, three economic activities that we need to think about or on which the economic processes are based are production, consumption, and distribution. So, this is the second activity, consumption, that we are going to talk about in this chapter. And the learning objectives of this chapter includes the following. So, first we will talk about a neoclassical model of consumer behavior, and specifically we would try to understand what is a budget line and a utility function and discuss how marginal thinking can be used to maximize consumer utility. But after having discussed this neoclassical model, we will also think about the historical and international context of consumer society and social context of consumer behavior. And with that, we will move on to think about the link between consumption and the environment, which is a very important and in vogue topic these days, and also evaluate the relationship between consumption and well-being. And with that, we will also discuss some policy options for influencing consumer behavior. An important question for economics and social science as well as for people generally is, why do people consume? And in a very basic economic sense, remember the definition of economics, which is about thinking about our need and wants and how to fulfill those needs and wants given our limited resources. So, consumption can be then thought of as an economic activity, which is a process by which goods and services are put to final use by people. So, consumption is the final culmination of that economic activities which we are after. We are after, survival or fulfilling our needs and wants, and consumption is that final goal that one wants to reach. But a question to ponder here is that, is consumption thus just that, fulfilling our needs and wants, or is it much more than that? So, in this chapter, we will see that consumption goes way beyond just satisfying physical or psychological need for food, shelter, and so on. And one way of thinking about it is through the neoclassical model that we will be talking about shortly, but it also goes beyond that neoclassical model, which focuses on maximizing utility, because we will see that people create and maintain identity using material things. So, our consumption behavior conveys a message to ourselves and others around us about who we are and how do we fit in or separate ourselves from other people. So, consumption is not just about fulfilling our needs or maximizing our utility, but also about conveying a message to ourselves and to others about who we are, how do we fit in the society, and how do we separate ourselves from others. And this is an important thing to understand about why do people consume or why do we consume. So, consumption and consumers are a very important element of the economy, but there is also a belief that consumer is the only king within this economy, which essentially means that the satisfaction of consumers' needs and wants is the ultimate economic goal, and that the economy is fundamentally ruled by consumer and their desires, and this is captured in the concept of consumer sovereignty. And this is a very important economic idea, because if this is the case, then all economic production is ultimately driven by the preferences of consumers. And all the economic activity is depends on how much people are consuming in a society, and then consumers become central to the idea of economy and economics in two ways, that their satisfaction is an important justification for the economic activity, as well as the fact that consumer keeps the economy going by demanding goods and services. So if you look at this, and this is a much debated concept in economics, whether it is the consumer demand that drives the economy or whether it is something else, whether it is the supply of things that drives the economy. It is a much debated topic within economics, and notion of consumer sovereignty or consumer as the king has both positive and normative component, and I hope you remember what positive and normative is from our chapter 1. So from the positive perspective, we can consider whether consumers really do drive the economy, and from a normative perspective, we can also ask a different question, and which is a very important question, that should people's preferences as consumer drive all decisions about economic uh, processes, including production, distribution, and resource management. And an important thing to remember is that this kind of analysis about consumption and people as consumers only think of people as consumer, but people are not only consumers, they are much more than consumers, right? People are often interested in other goals such as self realization, fairness, freedom, social relations, and ecological balances. And we saw that in our chapter 7 when we were reading about behavioral economics, that people are have all these other kind of preferences and desires that interacts with their being a economic you know I, entity. Therefore, if economy has to promote the well-being, all these other goals that people value must be taken into account. And an economy that made people moderately happy as consumers but absolutely miserable in other roles such as workers, citizen, community members would not be a very good economy after all. So in this part, in the next part of this lecture, we will just focus on the neoclassical model of consumer behavior and talk about two elements of it, the budget line as well as the utility line. So first we will look at the budget line. A budget line just shows the possible combination of two items that consumer would purchase given how much money do they have, right? So we will start with an example of thinking about a budget line, and suppose that you like to have bars of chocolate as well as the cups of coffee, and the price of bars of chocolate is $1 each and coffee is $2 per cup, right? So what will you do and how will you think about spending your money if you like both to consume both these items and you have a limited budget, is what a budget line is all about. So if your budget is supposedly say $8, the budget line essentially shows you all the combination of two items that you will be able to buy based on your budget, really. So if you look at this line, it starts at the beginning. If you want to just consume bars of chocolate and no coffee, that essentially means the point on the top of this budget line where you have 0 cups of coffee but 8 cups of 8 bars of chocolate. Because you have $8, you can spend all that, and each bar of chocolate is $1. You can spend all of your $8 buying 8 bars of chocolate. But if you spend all of your $8 buying 8 bars of chocolate, you will not be able to buy any coffee, right? coming down to a point where which says 2 and 4. At this point you are buying 4 bars of chocolate, right? So if you are buying 4 bars of chocolate and each bar of chocolate is $1, how much money do you have left? So you spend $4 on bars of chocolate, so you have $4 left to spend on coffee. And if each coffee sells for $2 per cup, then you will be able to buy 2 cups of coffee based on your budget. So if we look at another point on the budget line which says 3 and 2, so here you are buying essentially 2 bars of chocolate, and we know that each bar of chocolate is $1. So if you have spent $2 on your bar of chocolate, how many dollars are left with you? Think about it. If you have a budget of $8, you have $6 left with you, and with that you can buy 3 cups of coffee because coffee is $2 per cup, right? And at the last point, if you are just buying cups of coffee, how many cups of coffee can you buy? Remember, coffee is $2 per month, and this line is based on your budget, and your budget is $8. So if you have a $8 budget, you can buy 4 cups of coffee without buying any bar of chocolate. So essentially this is what a budget line is, which shows all the possible combination of 2 items that you could purchase given your budget, right? And so all the points along the budget line use up your entire budget, and this is what this line tells you. And the next, so this is the budget line, and the 2 things that you need to remember about budget line is essentially what is a budget line, how it is constructed, and how does this budget line shift. And if you think about it closely, you can really think about budget line as a production possibility curve, because here you are just talking about your own resources and exhausting the resource, buying 2 things. In the production possibilities curve, it was the country's resources and country deciding to allocate their all of their resources to 2 different things, right? So similarly, the budget line here shows you how you can allocate all of your given money into buying 2 of a combination of 2 different items, right? And the second thing, as I said, that you need to know about budget line is the shift in the budget line. So first is about the income. So what happens if your income changes? That essentially means that you have more budget to spend on purchasing these 2 items. So with the budget change or income change, the budget line shifts in a parallel manner. So if your budget increases, the budget line is going to shift outwards to the right, and if your budget decreases, your budget line is going to shift inwards to the left. And the second thing that can happen is change in the price of one of the goods that you are purchasing. So what happens to the budget line if the price of either bars of chocolate or cups of coffee increases or decreases? It rotates. So the budget line essentially rotates out or inward depending on what whose price has changed.